Well, hi everyone. I know we're scheduled to start at 5:15. I'll just give a moment for anyone else to enter the room as well. I'll introduce myself in a moment. Thank you so much for coming in today. I hope you've all been enjoying the conference. And I know we're almost at the end, so really appreciate everyone joining us for tonight. Um, I am going to introduce myself in a moment and talk a little bit about the topic. But as I do that, I just want to invite anyone who is here to go ahead and introduce yourselves as well. Just sort of share who you are, what brought you to the conference today. Just really love to see, what brings people together. And I will go ahead and get us started. So, just to share about myself, so this is the presentation on using local institutions really to sort of jumpstart some of that relational organizing and build towards organizational success when we go into a new area. My name is Marissa Vertrees. I'm a long-term community organizer. I'm currently based in Northern Virginia. I'm originally from Florida. I still consider myself a Floridian even after almost 2 decades out of the state. But I've been in Northern Virginia as a community organizer for more than 15 years. My background is primarily actually using faith-based organizing and congregations, but I've done a lot of things with a lot of different institutions, building grassroots and grasstops power. And as a trained community organizer, I have also gone into new areas, worked on national and international campaigns in a variety of different settings. And one of my favorite things to do is to really work in some of the more areas that are considered to be more traditionally conservative or rural areas, and really see how we can build up that power that's there, find the progressive leaders, help support them, find the institutions that really can offer that support and really build up progressive leaders and leadership around progressive issues around the country, because I really do think that there are, as polarized as we are, there are people who really support the issues that brings each of us here today. All around the country. And the more we can do to find those leaders, lift them up and make sure that they understand that they're not alone in their region or in the country, and build those organizations is incredibly valuable. And that is one of our paths to success. So that's a little bit about my background and what brings me here. And I will go ahead and dive in. Just give me a moment to bring up the screen. I'm not going to have it on the entire time because I can't see any questions that come in while I have the PowerPoint going, but I'm going to go ahead and get that started, go through that, and then jump in to answer any questions that we might have. So let me just get that up and running. Again, so sort of go where the people go using local institutions. And why institutional organizing? So there are a lot of reasons for this. As we get started, I love for people to think about, and I'm not able to really see again some of the questions in the chat the way my computer is set up. Apologies for that. But if anyone wants to share some of the organizations, whether formal or informal, that they're part of in their communities and their neighborhoods, would love to see that, either sharing it in the chat or just starting to think about it yourself. Because one of the reasons that I really like organizing around existing institutions, again, these might be formal institutions, they might be informal community institutions, is because so many people are a part of that. We're social creatures by nature. And so those really are things that can be found everywhere, with built-in relationships, built-in sort of cultures that you can pull on, and value systems, and where there might be a lot of different trust or feelings going into them. So one of the things that I really like, again, is about this feeling of trust. In a lot of ways, we keep hearing about sort of society is breaking down, that there is actually less trust in institutions now than there was before. But while that is true overall, there's a lot less trust in institutions that we sort of see, these institutions that are supposed to be protecting us and supporting us, that we've seen for a long time in our country. What we do see is that people have a lot of trust in their local communities and the institutions that they are part of because it's something that they see every day. It's people that they see every day. And that is a trusted source of information and a trusted source of values. And so, even more so than just going on a door and knocking on a door and starting that conversation, which is so important to do as well with electoral or issue-based organizing, when you're able to talk to people who are already gathered in one place and somebody has invited you in, or whether you've been invited to join just an event and had a chance to speak with people, there's a certain amount of trust in what's being said that helps get over some of the barriers that might happen, especially if you're going into a new area. Another thing is that there's a lot of people in one place, right? That's something that we might always be looking for. How can we reach a lot of people? How can we get our message out? And this is a time when you have an opportunity to talk with a lot of people at once. When we are doing, in-person events again, you can talk to people face to face. And it's really valuable. Just thinking about some of the congregational based organizing that has happened in different places. Even though we regularly hear that attendance in faith institutions is down, and it is, right? There's definitely a rise of the nuns or a rise of people who are spiritual but not religious or whatever it is. Each place still has on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday anywhere from almost 100 to a few thousand people in one place. And where else can you find that, really? And at community events that might be hosted in those spaces, again, you're going to have a lot of people in one place, and that's really valuable. Another thing is that, just going back to this idea of trust, is that these institutional organizing, it can really jumpstart that relational organizing that you need as well. I'm going to talk in some of the how-to about really making sure that you're still doing a lot of what you've probably been hearing about in other panels here about relational organizing as well. You still need to have those one-on-ones. You still need to build strong relationships with individuals, but this sort of jumpstarts that. It gives an opportunity to identify some of the people who already have relationships, right? Can invite others into speaking with you, and can also use theirs as they spread the message. But you can have those one-on-one meetings with them as well. And so it gives sort of just a shot in the arm to a lot of the outreach that you need to be doing, whether on any sort of an electoral or an issue-based campaign. And the reason it can do that jumpstart is because it also shows you where the natural leaders are in a community. And the natural leaders in a community might be who we traditionally think of as grass tops. If you're not familiar with that term, the grass tops are people that the grassroots listen to, right? That have a natural social or civic or community power base in an area. And a lot of times people think traditionally in terms of grass tops as the leaders who might be the chair of an organization, who might be, the head of the school board. What are some really traditional places where there's power in an area? But one of the best pieces of organizing advice that I ever received was the definition of a leader. And a leader is simply someone who has followers. So when we think of a leader who does have that natural power base, and when you look at, again, whether it is formal or informal institutions, the people that keep those going, the people that make sure that there are snacks at every event, that the flyers get out, right? That somebody like you gets to come in and talk. Those are natural leaders. They are people who other people are listening to. They are people who others are looking up to. And they are people who have that community power base. So when I look for someone who I personally am thinking of a grass tops, they might not go on my main list of who I want to sign a sign-on letter, who I know is going to get in the media, but I might not want, when I'm starting to really try to look at how to build out that organizing capacity in an area, someone who is in the paper all the time or who's doing a lot of fundraising. I do need those people as well. But what I really want in order to get the organization started is someone is not necessarily that platform or the influence, but someone who has people, someone who I know others are listening to, someone who knows the name of everyone on their street and can turn people out, right? And who has that natural power. And that might be the person who brings the brownies to every single PTA meeting. And so if you're looking at where there are these formal and informal community institutions, one of the things to keep an antenna up for and be thinking about all the time is not just this partnership that you're building, a local partnership with others who can get the word out. But how can you use this to look at who are the natural organizers and who are the natural leaders who already exist in an area and can help with the work that you are trying to do? So going on, a lot of the base of traditional community organizing, and some of you who might have done community organizing training probably already know this, was existing in institutions, right? It was based on where there were these institutions where you could bring people together. Now, a lot of things exist online. And so we have online organizing for institutions as well, but they still are there with people gathering in their communities and where people are gathering in persons. All of the groups that came out of sort of the Saul Alinsky model. And for those of you who aren't familiar, he wrote Rules for Radicals and started a lot of community organizing in the early part of the 20th century. Some groups that you might have heard of include things like Industrial Areas Foundation, which operates in a lot of urban areas, PICO or Gamaliel. And I encourage you to look some of those up to learn more about some of these issue-based or community-based organizing, which is separate from issue-based organizing as well. But a lot of that started with even congregations, not out of any sense of faith aspect to the work itself, but because, again, that's where people were and where people were gathering. So I always encourage people to think through that and think about, again, what are the institutions that people are using. I'm also a really, really big supporter of when you are starting a campaign in a new area. And this also, I would say, applies to trying to grow work that you are doing in your own community, is trying to talk to civic associations, neighborhood associations, whatever group exists to sort of split up, county board districts or very hyper local political setups in your region. And the thing is that if you are very intentional about meeting with the head of every single civic association, it will, again, give you an opportunity to speak to a lot of people at once. If you're going to meetings, it's going to give you a chance to talk to the people who are the most politically engaged and the most engaged in their community. It's going to, again, highlight those natural leaders. Just one mindset when you're doing any sort of organizing on the ground is always be thinking of recruiting and be thinking of who you can make sure you're laddering up to, who's taking on those bigger positions of those natural leaders, right? But if you are very intentional about reaching out to every single civic association, neighborhood association, or district, the other thing that will happen is you will make sure that you are talking to a very, very broad cross-section of who is present in this area across class, racial boundaries and demographics, right? Because you are hitting all of the different regions. A lot of times what happens when we start doing work in an area is even something as simple as the choice of where to hold our first meeting is going to set up a barrier for some people, right? Even something as simple as the first people we start talking to who are then bringing others in sets up how that organization exists going forward. And we have to be really intentional about how to make sure that we are truly building an electoral or an issue-based organization that can represent everyone. And in order to do that, thinking through really intentionally about where we're finding additional people. And when you're talking to places that are already divided up to represent every zip code in an area, you're going to immediately start reaching a much broader swath. It doesn't mean that they're all going to want to talk to you, but a lot of times they will and will be happy to speak with different people or have an opportunity to talk at an open meeting or something like that. And I just really want to stress that whether this is something that you've been doing for a while, but you're thinking of how to build out a more representative campaign next time around and build your electoral coalition, or whether you are thinking of expanding who you are representing in the issue or the local community that you are a part of, talking to a broad group of these sort of civic associations or otherwise looking at how the community is divided up and looking at where those institutions already exist is going to be a really helpful way to start going about that. Another thing to just be thinking about in terms of this institutional organizing, again, is that there is something, well, these civic associations and other places where there are already politics as a part of it are valuable because you know who's already engaged. a lot of the politics that we do in America also happen without being overtly political. And there's something very powerful about bringing people together, united around something else, and then helping to see how their values still are attracted to the issue that you want to bring up. And a lot of those connections exist outside politics, but you can still invite them in for some specific issues or for a specific campaign. This is part of the reason that, for instance, unions have been an important base before, right? Because there's something that everyone already has in common. They can't really disappear if they don't want to talk about the politics part of it, because we're being brought together on something else. And so you can still see people regularly if you're attending a lot of those meetings or events for other associations. And again, of course, organizing based organizing. And these are power bases within the community, whether it is intentional or not. That is where the people are and where you do have people power. So because this is a place where people already have natural power, when I start doing any of this, what I start looking at is where are the community power bases? And I do a community power map. So some of you may already be familiar with the term of a power map. I bet a lot of you already are looking at, different targets or who you want to talk to and where all of their influences are, whether it's people with financial power, whether it is people who are electoral power, which places have sort of VIP influencer power. But you can also sort of map that out across the community about where the people power is. And this is sort of a rough breakdown where I might think through, okay, what's a community power map of breaking things down between political organizations, civic organizations. So a civic organization, I would differentiate from a political organization because they oftentimes are thinking of themselves in a different way. They're thinking of themselves as bettering the group who they're a part of or doing charity work. But politics is always a part of it. So sometimes it can be a little trickier because they like to think themselves as not political, but it's still an organization that you want to be in touch with and just see if you can speak with. And then social organizations. And social organizations, again, will oftentimes have some sort of service group part of it, even if it's to bring kids together and do more trainings and things like that. You still are bringing people together, and there's often some sort of charity, service, issue-based discussions, education. Almost every organization has some sort of a betterment piece to it, right? And that's a place to get together. So that is one of the things that I do when I'm starting to look at how to build out this initial work. So I want to talk more about how to get started, but I do really want to just take a quick break, see how people are feeling, see if there are additional, if there are any questions coming up, if people have thoughts about what we've talked about so far or want to share ways that they have worked with institutions individually. It's always a challenge doing these. I know we're all used to it after 2 years of COVID, but I still very much miss being in a room with all of you wonderful people to have these conversations. So I meant to do this before the community power map, but I had already gone to that slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the how-to, but wanted to just take a quick break again and see if, if people had questions, see how everyone was doing. All right, I'm not seeing anything coming in. Okay, just see one comment. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it so far, but don't see other comments coming in. So I will go back and talk a little bit more about how to and how I think about this when I am getting started in an area, because one of the things that I have had to do doing community organizing and working with, again, really loving to get things started is go into a brand new area and see how to build a team that was going to work on a specific issue. So this has included things like going into part of Southwestern Oklahoma and building a team in a congressional district that was going to support anti-poverty, global anti-poverty work going forward, or working in the South, again, a place where I need to be thinking about how can I find people immediately who are going to be that trusted voice, invite me as an outsider from Washington, D.C. in, and let me speak to other people and then find those natural leaders. Because the other piece that I touched on a little bit when I was talking about trust is especially if you are if you're already a member of a community, you are going to know some of these power bases and you're already going to have some sense, some immediate connection to people who are there. You might need to think through a lot more how you can find other institutions to expand the diversity of your electoral or your issue campaign, but you already do have some connection with anyone that you're speaking with. But if you are coming from a different area, especially if you are coming from a big city, right, on the East Coast or on the West Coast, and going into parts of the South or the West, there's immediately this sort of, I don't want someone else coming in and telling me what to do. And that is a pretty natural reaction, I think, to anyone, to people coming in from outside of the community. Just doesn't happen to me as much in DC. So finding a way to have others say, no, this is someone who I trust. This is someone who I want you to listen to. And then finding someone to do that organizing when you leave, if you're not going to be staying there for a few years, if you're just, coming in once a quarter, is really important as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I start doing that research. I also see a question of somebody saying, do you go into sports events? So I actually think that sports events and sports teams are a fantastic way to look. I think if you're going into a place to just start meeting people face to face or seeing who's organizing some events before or around, especially if it's local events, might be good. I have not really used sports events before, but I like the idea of thinking through how to do that. I will say that, again, thinking through this idea of where there are trusted institutions and natural leaders, again, these are the people who other people are already looking up to and already listening to. Sports are great. There are places that many of us might know already. This might even be the case in your community, where getting one of the high school football coaches on your side to speak up at a town council meeting or to speak at a rally for your campaign is going to be one of the best gets you can have, because they are not seen specifically as political, even though all of us are political, right? We all have things that we feel and that we do, but also because they're known, there's a lot of trust. So definitely love thinking through how to do sports events. I haven't done a lot with major events, but I have tried to get in and talk with local leaders in high school areas before, because I think I do find it valuable, and know others have found that, especially with some of the more traditional community organizing. So the breakdown with the terms that I'm using are really, electoral organizing, where you're working on a specific electoral campaign; issue-based organizing, which is what a lot of us do as part of some of the groups that we're in. If you're vote.org, you're working on specifically the issue of expanding voter access and electoral access. If you are part of something such as, League of Conservation Voters or Eco Action Arlington, for a smaller one, your issue is specifically environmental issues. Community organizing is different in that the idea of community organizing is to build a broad power base that is then going to support each other in solidarity for whatever community issues come up. So if you're doing community organizing, you're definitely trying to get a lot of local leaders and from a broad swath. That's when it's really important to go into a lot of different areas and build a group of people who are going to be standing in solidarity for things that they need in other parts, things that other people in the community need. And the issues change by the year based on what's sort of bubbling up as the priority for the community. I didn't mention them on my list of institutions, but I will say now here that looking to those traditional community organizing groups that are part of something like Industrial Areas Foundation, PICO is another one, PICO. Those are good places to go to look for leaders. They usually don't enter into bigger coalitions or partnerships because they're very focused on all of the issues coming from the community that they are representing, or that makes them up, right? They're not representing them. It is completely that community there. But great place to find leaders, great place to point you towards additional institutions. You can really do a lot of relational organizing, and get to know people there, speak to them one-on-one, find out what's happening in the community, go to some of their events. So just want to highlight that as I use those terms of electoral organizing, issue-based organizing, and community organizing, those are the traditional definitions there. So most of my work comes from community organizing as trained, and then doing issue-based and electoral organizing in my professional work after that. So those are those three terms. I'm going to go back to the slides. As things come up, feel free to type things in chat. Otherwise, I will be happy to answer more of those after I get through these, and hear more from all of you. But also, if people have other suggestions or things that they've done in their own organizing, would love to see those as well. I really think a lot of wisdom comes from these conferences of being able to share that information with one another. So if there's anything you want to highlight, I'll be happy to read it out from the chat. But otherwise, and happy to answer additional questions as they arise. So pulling this up. So how to get started when you are going into a new area. I kind of went over this already, but I always love to do a community power map. This is something I do if I'm starting in a new area. This is also something I really encourage people to do if they're starting a campaign where they are when you're getting started, to do a power map of your targets, but also to do a power map of the community and where all of that power resides. The other thing is that when you are starting out for a new electoral or issue-based campaign in a brand new place, do your research, right? I spend a lot of time online just looking at maps, looking up all of the different institutions I can find, going to Patch, going to Facebook groups for a city, and seeing what groups are showing up. Not every organization is going to be the one that's going to meet with you right away. And so you want to find some places that are going to get you off the ground pretty quickly. The whole idea is, how can you use these local institutions that are already there, the local leaders that are already there, to jumpstart your campaign? If this is a place that you already are, or if you're planning on being there on the ground for a long time, then you can do a sort of a broader mix. You still want to find a few key wins early on, but that's a time that you can do a lot of a broader reach and spend time just being on the phone all day long, setting up coffee dates or Zoom dates and calling people, no matter what. But if you're looking for a few key things that might be the leaders that you want to talk to or who might get you in, these are a couple of key words that I look for. So if I'm looking at congregations, I look to see if they talk about social justice or social service, if they talk about missions, especially if it's a Christian denomination. For any of them, if they talk about outreach and it looks like it is about working with the community, you have to kind of drill down. Sometimes outreach means, how can we bring more people to church? But sometimes outreach means, how can we work more with the community? And that's for all different faiths across the board. And then if they work with interfaith groups, or if they have secular partners already for some of their charity work, that is a really, really good sign. And that whoever heads up that committee is somebody you want to talk to, or you want to try to talk to the person who is the, imam or rabbi or minister for that particular congregation, because those are good signs that they take in other partnerships, that they might be willing to talk to somebody new, that they would be willing to consider an issue. Any group that is a nonprofit, it's a little bit trickier when you're talking about electoral campaigns, but you can still do some outreach and see if somebody wants to speak with you one-on-one or share some information about who's there, again, looking for those natural leaders. But if it's an issue-based campaign, you might be able to even go and talk to the organization. For other organizations, again, just some key things. Do they do any service or advocacy activities? again, the groups that are doing service work, they might be willing to take on sort of some of this advocacy as well. If they're working with partnerships with other organizations, it just indicates a willingness to meet with outsiders. And if they have education opportunities, that can really be a great place where you can come in and do a presentation or talk to other leaders, right? So those are some of the cheat sheets that I look for. And then, you don't have a 100% success rate when you start calling and emailing folks, but you can just get started looking for some of these natural leaders. You can also, if you see some public events, start showing up, getting the lay of the land, especially for groups that might be more service minded or socially minded. You can go to some different events and activities and see what's going on. You really want to do a lot of relational meetings. My first ask is never, can I come give a presentation? My first ask is, hey, can I talk to you one-on-one? Can I meet with you? Again, this is a foundation of relational organizing that you've probably been hearing about or practicing in other contexts, but those one-on-ones are still the gold standard of organizing. You should be listening more than you're talking. You want to say what you are asking for and why you wanted to meet with them, but you also want to hear what they are all about, what their concerns are in the community, what they're doing and their organization, and then have an ask for afterwards. Maybe that ask is, if something comes up naturally, like, oh, we're doing this event soon. Maybe that ask is, oh, can I attend the event? Can I talk with your group? But maybe the ask is, do you want to come together with a few other leaders and hear more and meet with other people with a group that you're putting together? So just think about what your ask is going to be. It might even be, can you give me 3 names? That's it. Sorry, I meant to say that earlier. Especially if you're meeting with natural leaders, can you give me 3 names of other people to speak with? But make sure you know why you're talking to them and are able to articulate that. Make sure you have an ask, but really make sure that a lot of that relational meeting is spent hearing from them. Be supportive and show up for others, especially if you're trying to build sort of a local partnership or going to be in an area for a long time. You want to show that you care about what they care about as well, that this isn't only a transactional relationship or something that you're just asking for. If you can show up for events outside of the specific ask as well, if they are open to that, if there's something that you can do to support their work or join a service group or show up with brownies, you want to be supportive in building these relationships as well. And then just another huge tip is when you're doing these initial meetings, be open-minded and don't say no for other people. I would say that is one of the biggest tips for organizing and advocacy in general. Never say no for other people. That doesn't mean that you need to call every single person because you don't have time. And you always know that there's some times when it's just not going to work. But for the most part, you really want to be open-minded. A lot of the work that you can do, meeting people one-on-one, having these relational conversations, you can start building some non-traditional allies. You can build some really surprising grass tops leaders, and you want to be open about what you are asking for and see if people are interested. So don't say no for other people. And I want to add to that, especially on issue things, is that Americans are not as conservative as anybody thinks they are. They're not as conservatives think they are, or as progressives think they are. And we see that when we see things like the minimum wage being raised in red states like Missouri and Florida, when we see Nebraska passing a clean energy legislation, when we see, places like Wyoming expanding Medicaid, right? A lot of the issues that we care about, there is broad-based support for. It is how they are presented. And when you can have these one-on-one meetings, you can break through some of the stereotypes and the initial assumptions that are there and get more people who are going to support your cause and maybe even support an electoral campaign as well. Because when you are meeting with people as people, you can break through, again, those stereotypes and you can have a real conversation. So once you have done these, sort of gotten started, some of the next steps might be identifying the formal as well as the informal leaders. That's what you're trying to do the whole time, is figure out who you can bring together. You might want to build a team of some of these local informal leaders, right, who you're staying in touch with regularly. You want to introduce them to one another. One of the things that unfortunately happens quite often, you may have even experienced this yourself, you may even be this person, is a phenomenon that I have heard called the lonely onlys, where you find a few different people who are really interested in the progressive cause or supporting Democrats, and they think that they're the only one in the area that's like that. And if you can find a few informal leaders, if you're in a place that seems not as open, right, especially if you're trying to get this started in a more conservative area, if you can identify a few of these informal leaders who want to support you but feel they don't have the support in their own community, and they meet with each other and can support each other, they can grow this together. So trying to introduce those leaders to each other, make sure that you are showing it for other groups, but also, again, you want to make sure that you're in touch with all the people you are looking for to lead some of these campaigns. For those local leaders, provide training points, trainings, provide talking points, provide ways to push back on misinformation. This might be a formal training. This might, again, just be getting together with people regularly, asking what they're hearing, asking how they're responding to that. A lot of the way that we are conservative in the country is that these sort of messages that get spread informally, right, on Facebook, on Nextdoor, and PTA meetings and things like that. And so if you have people who are ready in order to push back and have a response, then that can be really helpful. But even outside of that, just making sure they feel really comfortable explaining why they're supporting the work that you're doing is going to be very valuable. Figure out your asks. You always want to know what you're doing with these people. If you have a team of informal leaders, they are almost definitely people who are very busy. If you are going to an organization, an institution, and asking the people there specifically for something, again, it is people who are busy. If you have an issue-based campaign, it might be a really easy ask because you might just be saying, I need to go and I want everybody to sign this petition. With an electoral campaign, it also might be, I just need somebody, I need to get the petition signed so I can be on the ballot. But you might have bigger asks. You might need people to come out to a rally. You might be needing people to get out the vote operations for you. So you want to know what your asks are clearly, and not just ask people to kind of volunteer when they are already busy and doing a lot of things. You don't want to not ask busy people to do things. Again, we never say no for other people. They can make their own decisions. And as the saying goes, if you want something to get done, ask a busy person. So that's part of why these natural organizers and leaders are so important. But you do want to know exactly what you're saying so you don't burn people out. Be prepared for the long haul. Any sort of relational organizing is going to go better if you're not just sort of parachuting in and out. Even if it's something that you are working with people in an area where you don't live and you do have to visit, you want to still be in touch regularly. You want to be able to show support wherever you can. You want to make sure you're going to these different meetings and meeting with people and supporting them even outside of your initial asks when you're able to, and when you're in town, and just be there to support one another and have fun. Anytime you are building a new campaign, anytime you're building a new movement, it just provides a great opportunity to meet other people, to talk about the things that you care about, to lift up this passion, and to celebrate whenever you have wins, celebrate with the local leader team that you've built, celebrate with the institutions that you're working with, and celebrate their successes as well. I am in organizing because I really love meeting new people and talking to others, and finding people who might have cared about something for a long time and not known it and not known how to act on it, and making sure that they have those tools and giving them away. So if that's something that appeals to you, I would just say that make sure you have fun while you are doing it, because it's a great opportunity and it's a great gift we have in order to do that. So so we've got some time. I know I go kind of quickly, which I apologize for. But have time to answer questions and hear what people have to say. I see one that came in about how much do you pull in student leaders? I think that really depends on your campaign and what you want to do. Student leaders can be fantastic if you are doing a lot of intentional outreach around student leaders. That is sometimes a different campaign and different communications than you have for everyone else. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes you might be being a little bit more intentional. There's also sometimes a lot more rules about what kind of permissions you need to get with parents and in order to work in a school. Not saying not to do it. I'm just saying be very aware that if you're working with people who are at school and under 18, there might be additional questions you have to answer and things that you are considering. And that's something that I have done in campaigns when we are building out our youth outreach, as well as just making sure that we've got all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed. That being said, I think student leaders are fantastic. I think, again, you find a lot of natural leaders. When you're looking for student leaders, you look for people who are still really enthusiastic and have just done tremendous stuff. I think that especially if you're looking to institutions that exist, that might be something that you need to reach out specifically to a high school for, or just look at where there are already a lot of youth present. Because unfortunately, a lot of the institutions that we have, when you start looking at these sort of community civic groups, are older members of the population. So I guess it's kind of roundabout. I've used them in different ways. I think student leaders are wonderful. Make sure you're really thinking through what you're asking. Do you have a good suggestion for roping in 501c3 groups for support, since they cannot be political by definition? Are you thinking of specifically doing electoral work or issue work, or both would be my question to you. For issue things, 501c3 groups can actually do a lot more than they think they can. Okay, both. So for issues, again, 501c3s can do a lot more than they think they can. A lot of the times what you are speaking to them about is not anything that it's not a legal obstacle that you have to overcome. It is a concern obstacle that you need to overcome. So I would really ask what they care about. If they are nervous, ask what they feel comfortable doing. 501c3 groups have a limit on how much direct lobbying they can do, but they can do advocacy. And the difference there, with the huge caveat that I am not a lawyer. So if you are taking this and writing it down for your own 501c3 group, check it with a lawyer first. But having worked in 501c3s and done advocacy where I'm asking 501c3 groups to do things for me, this is what I can present. They can do advocacy where they speak about the importance of a specific issue. And you can do that all day long. You can write that you really, really, really think that it is important for the school, for the county board to make sure that you have clean electricity. Right? You can write to your state, you can have a one-on-one meeting with your state legislature talking about the importance of addressing climate change. You have a limit of 10% in terms of money and time on how much you can do lobbying, which is on a specific bill. So it's once you go and say, I need you to support SB 1410, that you have more of a challenge. But 501c3 groups can do a lot around advocacy and around talking about issues. And bringing people together to learn more about what's going on in their state, around their budget, around climate change, et cetera, than they think. And that also goes for congregations, which is one of the things that people get really nervous about. But this is all totally legal. They can also, when it comes to electoral work, have voting guides. They can have people speak if they invite everybody during election season. So they cannot have some talk to them about why they should vote for them. They can have everybody come and talk about why they should vote for them. So my tip would be to, when you are first talking to someone, sort of get a sense of if they are using it as an excuse or if they really want to do this but are actually concerned. If for either one of those, try to figure out where their comfort level is, but then do a little bit of research on what I was just talking about on your own, to share that information with them and see if they might be comfortable doing some issue-based presentations or doing some letters about a specific topic, because again, that's totally legal and okay. And you can even do a little bit of lobbying as long as it is limited. For electoral campaigns, like I said, it's harder. You can't just have somebody come in. that might be a time where you use that to look for local leaders and natural leaders who can help connect you with others and sort of build something that's going as an informal structure outside of that. This is actually something that's pretty common. I have done this when I worked at a faith-based 501c3 before, and somebody had contacted me about helping to support an electoral campaign, and basically I just had to firewall everything, right? Like I wasn't going to use any of the materials at my organization for this. I only met with them after hours, but that doesn't mean I couldn't still say like, okay, here are some people that we need to talk to. Here's some ways that you can talk to people and provide a little bit of advice as an informal leader in the community to help make those relationships and help introduce them to other people. So again, I would just say find out what the comfort level is. Don't push people to do anything that is going to get them in trouble or illegal. But if they really want to do work but are concerned, try to work with them to find ways around that. And with issue-based work, there's almost never a real problem with 501c3 groups. It's almost always something that they get nervous about, but that is not actually a legal concern. Other questions and comments from people? And thank you all for attending again. Really appreciate people showing up and joining on the last night. I know we've been going through a lot of different things and we've had a lot of information shared. It's been really great. So really appreciate all of you being here. So yeah, any other questions that people have? Right, as you think of this, I'll share a little bit more just on how to do some of this, how to do some organizing in your community if you are already there. So yeah, I see some things coming in. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you joining us. I just want to say one more thing about sort of what I mentioned at the end about being in for the long haul and talk a little bit about if you are especially in your community and trying to build these relationships and talk to other organizations. Just is really, really important to make sure that you are showing up for and supporting other people, especially if you're trying to work with a group or a demographic that you haven't worked with before. And I mean that in the broadest possible sense. If you are a progressive organization that has identified an unlikely ally in a conservative group and you think that you might be able to build some support, you don't want to do anything that goes against what you believe in, right? But you might want to find ways to just sort of show up for events, support each other in a service group, service project or something like that, but really build that trust so you're not just asking people for you. If you are a primarily white organization that is trying to diversify, which is something that, I've worked with groups before doing that. That is, you don't want to just be telling people why they need to join you. You need to make sure that you're listening to concerns, showing up for other people, and supporting their work as well. So just want to share a little bit about really thinking through as you're using local institutions, how to support other leaders, how to support the work that they're doing, and how to really build some strong partnerships and show up for each other as well. So I will share if people we've got a little bit more time, but I'll probably wrap up shortly if we don't have additional questions. I'm just going to close out with a little bit about if you want to get in touch with me, really happy to answer questions afterwards, talk to others. So I will just share a little bit about my contact information. And if you think of additional questions while I am doing this, please feel free to type them in. Really welcome the opportunity to talk more about this and make sure I am answering any questions that come up. But I will just share. So this is my contact information. I now work with an organization, New Fundamentals, that we founded to help with coaching, campaign strategy, and trainings for volunteer and staff. So newfundamentals.com, hope to I see it says New Fundamentals, newfundamentals.com. If anyone wants to get in touch, if you have additional questions afterwards, please reach out. Would love to speak with you more and share more about the work that we do if you are interested. But even outside of that, if you have additional questions about this particular presentation or things that you've thought of, you can email me, Marissa at newfundamentals.com. I love talking about this and working with other people on how to build community-based organizations and how to think through, again, how to find those people who really want to do this work already and don't know that they do things that they really care about and bring that forward. And I think that's what a lot of us are trying to do as we build our power nationally. So would love to help you continue to do that. So thank you all for attending. I apologize for ending early, but if there's no other questions, we can all have a little bit of time as we go through the rest of the conference. So, oh, sorry. I see that there's been a few questions. I apologize. My chat was not showing up. Okay. Sorry. I apologize so much. I love that there's questions here. I just saw the moderator show up and then they popped up. So I saw a question about how did I start organizing. So I actually started organizing forever. I come from a family that is very politically involved and went to school board meetings with coloring books when my mom was speaking there and ran a campaign to get more sidewalks in my hometown when I was in third grade. But I started organizing professionally, actually coming out of the faith-based world. I originally was in the policy space, found that I didn't love sitting in a cubicle and reading reports, and was volunteering at a congregation where the opportunity really came up to start doing the community organizing piece professionally and get community organizing training. And it's been a wonderful opportunity. And I see a question about what is the most exciting, fun part of the job for you. And I would say, as I've mentioned before, the most exciting and fun part of the job is for me having that opportunity to talk to people who have not realized that they have the power to create change in their community, that they don't have the power to create change in the nation, or even just small scale change at the school that their kids go to or in their community, and give them the tools and the training that they need in order to make that change and connect them to others who feel the same way. Because there is this thought that that other people don't care about it as much, or that we are in this very conservative world. But there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of people who are concerned about the things that all of us here at this conference are concerned about and want to take that on. And so I that's part of the reason that I really emphasize in all of these: don't say no for other people. Think really creatively about who you want to reach out to, show up for others. But when you can really do that in a broad-based way and bring people together, you can jumpstart your own campaign, and you can provide tools to have lasting leaders. When you find those informal leaders and bring them together, that is strengthening the work that you are doing, but you are also teaching them that there are others in the region that really want to do this work as well. And they can come together to continue organizing, and they can build something lasting in the region. And the more we can do that, the more we can achieve this change at a national level. So that is the most exciting and fun part of the job for me. I also will say, just like I said, as a community organizer, I really liked meeting new people. I love seeing new areas. I love going to whatever a community is the most proud of and highlights of them. And I've been to the original KFC. I've been to state parks around the country. I think that if you are doing a lot of organizing work, being genuinely able to find joy in the community that you are working in is a really important piece. So I want to encourage that as well. I see a question about, could you share your slide deck? I am happy to share my slide deck. I'm actually going to ask the tech moderator, one of the tech moderators on the call, what the best way to do that is, but I would be more than happy to share my slide deck with everyone. So don't know what the easiest way to do that is, but yes, I will be glad to. And Okay, I see a question at the bottom that in college community development, the professor mentioned visiting a community before starting your organizing and doing some research that way. So I think that, yes, that is important research. And I think one of the things that yes, I'm going to say you should visit a community if you can. That's not always directly an option. The more you can be an actual part of a community, whether it is visiting it or moving there in a place where you live, in order to do organizing, the more valuable it is. And I think if you are actually trying to start a community organizing group, that can only be done by being in the community regularly, making sure that you really understand what is going on, and doing that on the ground research. What happens oftentimes with the way our current political setup is you may be doing issue-based organizing and recognize that you really need to get things started in a specific area. You really need to strengthen up a specific district that you think you might eventually be able to swing, or you know that if you can keep the margins down there, you'll work on the statewide races. There's a lot of times where we need to be thinking creatively about where we need to have additional people, where we need to do this organizing work. And based on the time scale of when elections are, having a lot of time to do a visit, do research, go back and do another visit, unfortunately just isn't there. So I think that for long scale organizing work, which is the best way to do it, trying to make sure that anytime you are starting and organizing, you are thinking about how do I want the people that I'm speaking with, what do I want to see here in 5 years, is really important. And so I would say yes to always trying to visit, and know, the more you know about an area, the stronger those conversations are going to be, even in the first place. If you don't have the time to do that original visit, then some of those cheat sheets that I gave about what I look for in an area will help get you started. And then while you are there visiting, you should also be looking around. You should be driving around the community. You should be seeing what's going on. You should be grabbing a local paper. They still exist, right? With things in the back. Or again, going to look up all of the Facebook events, going to a community center. I will say, if you are in an area doing a visit, even if you don't follow up on this, just to get a sense of it, going to the public bulletin board at the library and at the coffee shops, right, is a great way just to see what is even happening, and what is the feel of a different area. So I think that there are some ways to get that started. I think that doing research and visiting at the same time is a good way to do it as well. So you can do a lot more. You can get a lot more of a sense of a place while you are on the ground, but you can still set up some initial meetings, even from outside, if you kind of know what you're looking for. And if you can sometimes strike gold with some of that initial email, of find someone who really knows a lot and really wants to tell you about their area, because you can learn a lot about the community and the city that you're in from those initial conversations as well. And when you're having that relational organizing, even asking people not just what are they concerned about, but what do you love about this place, right? How long have you lived here? What do you like about it? Why have you been part of this organization for so long? Those relational one-on-ones give you a lot of that sense of a place as well, and help with not only you getting a better sense of the area, but getting a sense of who you're working with as a leader, and getting a sense of what they are looking for and why they agreed to this meeting, right? Because that's something that I am always asked when I go in is, how did you find me and why did you want to meet with me? Which I then explain why I might have thought of them as a leader who I wanted to speak with. But then my question is always for them, what made you accept and why did you want to meet with me? I don't say a lot of people just don't answer, but it's true. When you're doing this initial organizing outreach and talking to people, a lot of people don't answer because it's a stranger who just reached out to them out of the blue. And said, I'm going to be in town for 2 days. Can I say hi? So a lot of people don't answer. And so if they did, I want to know what made them willing to speak with me as well. What were they hoping to get out of it? What are they interested in? What are they looking for? So there's a lot of different ways to do that research, from visiting an area and walking around, from going to different meetings, from asking people directly, and then doing some of that research online and looking for some some keywords and some codes that as you are doing a lot of local organizing over a long time, you just start to pick up on. So the words that I wrote there are things that I have always looked for. Depending on the issues you are working on when you're doing online research, you might start to notice that there's other things that really stand out about what's getting your response from you. So, so your professor was right. You should visit a place. You can also do a lot of on the ground research as well. I had someone. I was just told that if you would like to get a copy of the slide, you can email me directly. So that is Marissa, Marisa, at newfundamentals.com. Our site is newfundamentals.com, but you can also email me, Marissa, at newfundamentals.com. I'll be happy to send a copy of the slide deck over and share that with you. You can have some additional information. Other questions or things that might have come up. It looks like one more. Do you have any advice for starting or reviving an issue-based coalition that doesn't already exist or is very weak in a rural area? I do. I'll start to think of some generic advice. I would love to know if there's a specific issue you are thinking of, because sometimes that can be helpful. So share that if you have it. But otherwise, in terms of additional advice, I think the first thing I would do is start some of that research that you might be doing that I said to do in any area, is look for what other things are going on and hold some initial meetings. If you are trying to just get started, sometimes you can just try to get some people together and put something on Facebook and see who comes. But otherwise, starting to do some of that initial research, reaching out to institutions, and depending on the issue that you are, if there are even things like Kiwanis, Elks, anything like that, where you can talk to people one-on-one that might be willing to have a speaker come in, that's a great place to start doing some discussion of the issue that you're talking about and see who might be interested. There are, in rural areas, really, really big fan of looking to congregations that are there, because oftentimes if you are in a conservative rural area and there is a congregation that is doing service work or mission work, it might be the only place where it's sort of acceptable to be publicly talking about things that might be considered liberal. I feel that's an odd phrasing, but it's something that I have experienced, where people are nervous in a very, very conservative rural area to do something that is too publicly liberal or progressive. But if there is a congregation that's already doing service work, that's kind of expected. And so you can find some leaders there and some people who are willing to talk about it. And just very slowly doing a lot of these relational one-on-one meetings. The other thing is absolutely look for opportunities to have a table. I did not talk about tabling at events because a lot of this was focused on relational organizing. But if you are trying to get started in a rural community, look for places where you can have a table. See if you can do something at the county fair. See if you can do something at any sort of an event that's going on. If there is a parade, even, can you be there with a petition and just talk to some people one-on-one and see who might be interested in what you're doing, and get some names, and then have those initial one-on-one conversations. So talk to people one-on-one. After you talk to people one-on-one, have a bigger gathering and get people together. But there's a lot of opportunities. It can be a little bit harder. Okay, sorry. My chat is being slow on having things come in. So I now see what you typed about trying to reach out to more public transit riders. So again, I would say absolutely what I said before. Have those one-on-one discussions. Look for places where you can provide some education. If you are, it would be very, very interesting for you to look at the demographics of the public transit riders and see who it is. My gut guess is that it would be an interesting split between people who had less money. And if you are in a place that has like a immigrant population, they might be transit riders, and elderly folks. That would be my guess, but you would want to sort of check that out. And then once you have better idea of the transit riders, because in a rural area, generally speaking, there's not as much public transit, so it's kind of split. It's not going to be as many people. You can start to talk to them, look for the institutions that are really responding to those people and seeing where they are present. And that can give you an opportunity to get more of that population, but then also go to things where you can have a table, go to other events that are going on, because you also might want to see, how can I find out who would use public transit if it were an option? So I think that in your state, if you're in a rural area, looking for the institutions that are providing gathering spaces and already have trust with the communities that are using public transit, and then thinking more broadly about how to do some tabling, how to do some one-on-one outreach, to expand the base of who would use public transit, would be really, really helpful there. And as you're talking to the community that's already using it, maybe getting some talking points to share with others who aren't even familiar with public transit issues. But that would be how I would get started. Yeah. County fairs only come around a couple times a year, but there's almost always an opportunity to have a table for it. Music festivals sponsored by local radios, any sort of place where there's a lot of people. Yeah, somebody says to describe what sort of transit you're looking for. And I would say that as well. And helping other people understand who it's for would be really valuable. But yeah, any sort of, again, we're talking about institutions, but events are really helpful too. Any place where you have a lot of people gathered in one space is really great for organizing. So whether that is an opportunity to talk to people at a formal or an informal gathering, or whether that is having a table, just make sure you're really approaching that tabling with the mindset of being excited about talking to other people. I can't emphasize enough how much, if people know that you don't want to be talking to them, they're not going to want to talk to you. So the more you can make sure when you are having these one-on-one relational meetings, when you are going to somebody else's event, when you are at a table, making sure you are approaching it with the mindset of this really great opportunity to talk to other people about something you're passionate about, and give them an opportunity to do something that they are passionate about as well, and take action on something that is important to them, is really, really valuable. You want to have that positive attitude, or people will pick up on it and they're not going to want to join, and they're not going to want to have another 45-minute coffee with you while they're busy if it feels like it's not something that you want to do too. So be excited about organizing. Other questions, ideas, suggestions? If you have suggestions for rural organizing as well, would love to hear from you too. All right. Well, I do really want to thank you all for coming. Apologies for missing some of the questions when I first came. My chat wasn't scrolling quickly. But I'm really glad that we did have some questions and I was able to answer them, able to present this. If you do want the slide deck, or if you want to reach out to find more about me or organization, Marissa@newfundamentals.com is the email. Really look forward to hearing from you. I really appreciate all of you taking the time to join. And to be a part of this. Really like the suggestions coming up in the chat as well. So somebody is just saying about that they do square dancing and call. So that is fantastic. And coordinating with leisure activity folks. Yes, absolutely. Every group that you can think of to be a part of, to has people present, is a great opportunity to coordinate. It's a great opportunity to find those informal leaders. I don't usually look for the leisure activity areas for my first pass, just because there's a little bit more confusion about why I'm even talking to them, or whether this is something that fits into them. I have to spend some time convincing them that there's a reason that they should be participating in whatever I'm trying to do. But Leisure activity is still people in one place. A lot of leisure activity areas have an opportunity to talk to other people or have some sort of service component to it also. So 100% leisure activity is great. Talking to student leaders, thinking about sports events, all of the things that have been suggested in the chat as well are really fantastic ideas. So I encourage you to take these ideas going forward, think through how to spread this out in your own community and do wonderful community organizing and do great work to build broad power base for progressive issues and progressive campaigns across the nation. So thank you. Yeah, thank you, everybody. And I will give us back 5 minutes of time. But yeah, really wonderful to be here with you tonight. Thanks.